How's it going, everyone? So this is going to be class 2 session 2, and what this session is going to focus on and look at is going to be 3D tracking. So what I want to do is I just want to find my piece of footage. I'm going to bring it into my workspace timeline over here at the bottom, and over here by the effects and presets I'm just going to type in 3D, and I think it's cinema, camera. So 3D camera tracker. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to select it and drag it over to my footage and let it analyze. It's going to take a while to analyze. So what I'm going to do is just briefly explain what it's doing and then let it analyze. You can see over here, the top left hand side, there's quite a bit that needs to be analyzed because the footage is quite long. So about 9 minutes. But I just want to explain to you what's sort of happening. So with the tracking exercise from the first session, what's going on there is that we found a point of high contrast and we then applied the tracking point to it, and we allowed After Effects to try and track that sort of information based on the point of contrast that we selected, and that was done with one specific point. But what's happening now with 3D tracking, what After Effects is essentially going to be doing is that it's going to track multiple points on this footage. So anything from over here where there's darker areas to over here, maybe even by the houses. It's going to be tracking multiple points, and those multiple points are going to then cluster together in groups of 3, and that will allow us to place a graphic or text within that point space. It's also going to be tracking perspective as well, and once everything has been tracked and sorted out where you can have your points, you're going to be able to target which cluster of points you want to select to apply your graphic or your text layer or your shape layer. And we're going to have to create a null object and a camera, and then we're going to apply the track data information from our specific point onto our null object, and then from there we are going to create a graphic, and we're going to copy the position keyframes of our null object onto the position properties on our graphic layer. If that makes any sense, it should make much more sense once we start doing it, but for now I'm just going to let the clip analyze, and we'll go from there once it's finished. So once everything's sort of done and we let After Effects do its thing, it now 3D track the footage that we have. You can see that now there's this massive target that's on my screen. So just to make a little bit more visible, I'm just going to drop the target size slightly to about 7%. Now you can see more or less where everything should be. So let me go maybe 2%. 2% seems a bit better. So the one thing I just want to mention, just from my own personal experience, is that using the 3D camera tracker has been a little bit unstable. There's been some footage that I've dragged in and tried to 3D camera track, and it said failed. So it will analyze it fully, it will say solving for camera, and then I'll get a red bar that says analyzing failed. And you can try again, you can try and reset it. The main sort of things that I did differently in comparison to now is I would try and shorten my footage. So for example, this was 38 seconds long, and I would try to shorten it to 10 seconds and then camera track it, 3D camera track it, and it would provide me with that error and it would say it was failed. So I'm assuming that's the problem. I'm not entirely sure, but I would suggest just bring your entire piece of footage in, or at least pre-cut it inside of Premiere, export it, and then bring it into After Effects to 3D camera track that specific piece of cut footage. So over here at this point now, as you can see now, as I'm hovering over these different tracked points, if I just scrub through, you can see that there are multiple points all over the place that are now tracked. So what we're going to be doing is that I want to choose a section of points. You can see over here, for example, if I hover over here, there's a light white sort of triangulation that happens between 3 points on the tracked footage. So I want my object to be placed over here, somewhere, let's say for example here. So I'm going to right click, and what I'm going to say now is I'm going to say create null and camera. I'm going to create null and camera, and you can see exactly now that there is my null object. My null object is tracked to those specific points. As you can see, it's moving as my footage is moving, and there's a camera in place as well to allow this null object to move in conjunction with the tracked points of the footage. So once you have applied the 3D camera tracker, it's tracked successfully. You select your 3 points of triangulation which you want to apply a graphic or text or an image to. Then you're going to right click. You're going to say create null and camera. And at this point in time, all I want to do is I want to say layer new, and I want to have a text layer. And I just want to type in 3D camera tracking. I'm just going to highlight it and change the font. I'm going to do something quite basic. Let's go for that. And what I want to do now is I want to go into my null object, go into the transform tab, and highlight the position attribute of the transform tab. You can see now this looks quite different. There's now 3 different values. There's an X value, a Y value, and a Z value. And that's because once you tracked your footage with a 3D camera, and you say you right click and you create a null object in a camera, the null object is created in a 3D space. You can see over here this 3D cube has now been applied to the null object. So all I want to do now, once the position attribute has been highlighted, I just want to click Ctrl C to copy, and I'm going to go into my text layer. I'm going to click the drop down arrow, move into the transform tab, and select the position attribute, and I want to say Ctrl V to paste. So right now my 3D text should be tracked. Apparently not. So we're just going to go back in and see why that is happening. It might be the camera position. That's what we're trying to change. So again, like I said, I'm trying to keep all my sort of issues and problems in, so that if you encounter them, then it's already covered. So let's try that. So we're going to go to 3D camera, because there are keyframes over here, not necessarily on the null object, even though the null object is tracked. What if I had to position this where I wanted it to be? Increase the size of it slightly. If I had to position it there, and what if I had to parent it to the null object? Still not tracking properly. So what I think, just try that again, parent it. No, still not tracking properly. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to just click the position attribute of the 3D tracker camera, and I'm going to copy that. I'm going to go to my text layer that I created, go to the position, highlight it, and Ctrl V to paste it. And now it should be tracked. Is it not tracked? Let me try and place it in a 3D space. Okay, so now it's sort of tracked. Let's just double check this. It's gonna undo before we pasted the keyframe. So that's what we had. If I make that into a 3D space, and if I copy the position now, copy, and we're going to paste the position. There we go. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Okay, that makes much more sense. There we go. Now it's tracked. Okay, so this is what my problem was. So I'm going to just explain that to you. I just want to undo undo. Okay, so I'm going to delete this text layer so I can explain to you again what's happening. So we had our piece of footage, we then 3D camera tracked it, getting the 3D camera tracker via the effects and presets. And then once that was done tracking and analyzing and it was successful, then we had our target and we could then select. So go to our camera tracker, here's our points. We selected this area over here, this general area, to be our triangulation point of reference. We selected it, we right clicked, we then said create null in camera, and it created a null in a camera object, and the null was then created in 3D space. So I wanted to track text to it, so I'm just going to go again, layer, new text layer, and once again 3D camera tracking. Just give that a capital. 3D camera tracking. And the problem being, so what I did initially was correct, I just forgot to do an additional step. So we are still going to copy and paste the positioning of the null object onto our text layer, because the null object is tracked to the footage. As you can see, it's moving, whereas the text layer is standing still. And the reasoning why this didn't work the first time is that my text layer, which I just created, is situated in a 2D space. As you can see over here, it doesn't have its 3D attributes assigned yet. So as soon as I click this icon over here and allow it to contain 3D attributes, that way when I copy and paste the information, the position information of the null object, so I'm going to just Control C, copy, and I'm going to go onto the attributes under the transform tab and position the position attributes under the transform tab of my text layer. I'm going to say Control V to paste it. You can see it immediately places this text within 3D space because I've assigned it a 3D space and I've attached it to the null object by giving it the exact same positioning. Because with 3D camera tracking, what is essentially happening is that After Effects is now analyzing the footage and it's moving the camera in 3D space. So let me see if there's a nice way for me to show you how this is working. So let me go for on top of over here. Let me rather go one view and on top. So if I scrub through this now, what I want to show you is that this over here, this red line, so this red line over here is our text layer. I can show you it's our text layer. I'm going to change the color to orange, and now this line has been changed to orange. So all I did is I changed my camera from active camera to the top view, and now this line is now orange because I changed the color of my text layer. I can make it yellow, it will change as well. So what's happening now is After Effects has generated a camera based on the 3D tracked perspective of this 2D footage, and has created a camera. This white square is the camera. And what is essentially happening is After Effects has now generated different tracking points on 2D footage and is moving a camera back and forth, rather more forward into the footage, and it is allowing you to attach whatever sort of object or graphic or text onto these 2D situated tracking points. So right now if I play through it, if I go back to my active camera, so yeah, if I go back to my active camera, then you can see nothing's really happening except the footage being moved. But what is actually happening is After Effects has generated a camera and it is moving the camera forward. Your tracked points that After Effects generated with the 3D camera tracker are still within a 3D space, and it is moving the camera based off the tracked positioning and points of your 2D footage. So it's moving a camera, a virtual camera that it created. It's not moving your text, it's moving the camera based off its tracking points that it generated, and we are just attaching a graphic or an object or a layer or text to a cluster of those points. So I'm going to go back to my active view now, and we do know that our text layer is tracked successfully. we just need to resize and reposition it. So right now I'm just going to select the 3D text layer over here. I'm going to scale it down because that's way too big. So I'm going to scale it down to about here. I'm going to change the positioning. So it's going to just be the X value. I'm going to move it slightly over here so that it's not off screen. Resize it again. Move it over here to the middle. And now we can see that it's tracked in a more stable sort of position. So now if we play through it, you can see that our 3D text, or our text in the 3D space now, is tracked according to the null object based off the tracking information gathered by After Effects using the 3D camera tracker on 2D footage. And then from here you can obviously add any sort of animations you want to this 3D text, because it has no keyframes, it's just in the correct position in 3D space. So what we want to do is, let's just say for example I want to change the rotation, have the words flip up. Just going to play around, so it's not the Z rotation, it is not the Y rotation, the X rotation. So this is what I'm looking for now. So what I'm going to do is I just want to give it a value of -90 so that it's rather flat. And I'm going to start the stopwatch to set a keyframe, and as it moves forward, let's say when it gets to about just past 1 second, I want to make the 0 to have it pop up. So as it plays through, you can see the 3D text come up, but that happens rather too slow for me, so I'm just going to move this a little bit forward, adjust the keyframe positioning. I'm going to highlight it and go to the graph editor. I'm going to select the 2 keyframes and click F9 so that I can apply easy ease to it to make it a Bezier curve. And then what I want to do is I want to have it start off rather slowly and then shoot up. So right now it's going to start off rather slowly and then shoot up, but this sort of top curve over here is preventing it from shooting upwards. So I'm just going to drag this handle down quite a bit, so it's going to go very slowly and then shoot up to its final position. So if I play through it now, zoom out a little bit, play through it now, so slowly and then shoot up. So it's not a really big adjustment, but it sort of gives it a little bit of a more of a flippy effect, if that makes sense. And that's how we track in 3D space. Now obviously this doesn't necessarily have to be text. You can create a graphic with a transparent background inside of Photoshop, or it could be a video with a transparent background that you want to attach to something within the footage that you're going to 3D track. But this just gives more of a 3D perspective to your footage whenever you're tracking and applying graphics, in opposed to the 2D tracking of session 1. So again, just to make this clear, me personally, I've found 3D tracking to be quite unstable. Rather bring in the entire piece of footage, don't shorten it and then 3D track it, rather 3D track it and then shorten it by pre-composing it and shortening it. And then you, once it's 3D tracked, you have your target, you select with the left mouse click, then you right mouse click, you create a null object and a camera. That null object is in 3D space, and you can copy and paste its position information onto whichever graphic or text you want to apply into this virtual 3D space. So in this case, we decided on creating a text layer, and this text layer says 3D camera tracking. I made it a 3D layer. I assigned it to 3D attributes, and then I copy and pasted the null positioning attributes onto our text layer so it sits in the correct position, because After Effects is essentially moving a virtual camera and it's not moving the tracked object, whereas in the 2D tracking we are moving an object based off whichever point of reference you want to track. So for example, we used a woman opening up a MacBook Pro, we track something to her watch, the null object is moving, whereas in this case the null object is completely still and the camera is moving. So our null object over here in the yellow is completely still, but our camera is moving. Very different from normal tracking in a 2D space. So that's tracking, 3D tracking inside of After Effects. So I hope this is quite helpful and quite useful. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Nothing too hectic and too complicated about it. So give it a go, try it out. And again, if there is problems with your footage and 3D tracking, try and use a different piece of footage and try to make sure that you don't shorten the footage before you 3D track it. Okay, peace.